let's talk about Venus retrograde. So this is a really important transit period because it only comes around like every 2 years. And when it does come around, it's really gonna shake some things up. Now, before I get into it, I do wanna say I'm sorry I haven't been posting. I've been very under the weather this past week and a half. I'm finally kind of bouncing back a little bit, so just kind of bear with me and thank you for your patience. I'm glad to be filming content again. I have my website in the description if you would like to book a reading with me. I also have my email in the description if you have any questions, and I do have an email list going, so if you go to my website, it'll be like there's a page you can go to sign up. It's totally free. Okay, let's get into the video. So Venus retrograde is going to take place from March 1st all the way to April 12th of this year, of course. So it's gonna start in Aries and then it's gonna rewind all the way back into Pisces. That said, if you are someone with prominent Aries or Pisces placements, I don't care if it's Sun, Moon, Rising, Venus especially, Mars, Mercury, you're going to feel this, okay? You just are. Now, I also want to give a little shout out. As I go through what you can expect, I'll also be touching on some other signs and houses as well. So stay tuned. Even if you're someone without a lot of Aries or Pisces in your chart, you might have an Aries or Pisces ruled house or some other signs, of course, that can definitely be impacted. So stay tuned because I'll be going over a bunch of different celestial bodies, placements, houses that can be affected here. Okay, now let's kind of get into what you can expect from this time period. So Venus retrograde, I want to kind of address a big concern that I see, which is there's kind of this fear that if you just started a relationship, like right before Venus retrograde, does that mean that you should halt? So I want to kind of talk about this. Planets are always retrograding. It's very hard to find a moment in time where not one planet is retrograding, okay? Planets are always retrograding. It's very hard to stop our lives for a retrograde. It's just not very realistic. It's not very pragmatic. If you just started dating someone, like let's say you just got into a monogamous relationship this week and you know the Venus retrograde is approaching, you're fine. If the relationship is not meant to be, when Venus retrograde comes around, red flags might start popping up, and that can kind of give you the insight of, okay, maybe it's best to get out now while I still can. If you are in an unhealthy relationship, I don't care if that relationship has been going on for 2 weeks or 2 years or 20 years. If you are in a bad relationship, this Venus retrograde can give you the necessary push you need to get out of it, especially because it's going to be going back into Pisces. Pisces is all about endings, okay? It's surrendering, it's sacrifice, it's giving something up. So if you're in a bad relationship, yeah, the Venus retrograde can give you that necessary push you need to end things, okay? If you are in a good relationship, however, this retrograde period can just allow you and your partner to, I don't know if reconnect is the right word, but yeah, in some cases, reconnect. Your intimacy can strengthen. It's possible that you and your partner will undergo some type of event or circumstance that just brings you closer together, especially emotionally, almost kind of like a vow renewal of sorts, okay? So if you're in a healthy relationship, I don't really want you to freak out, and you will know. Like, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, whatever, I'm sure you kind of know which relationship you're in, whether it's healthy or not. If you just started dating someone, this is kind of tricky because it's like you're just getting to know that person. So some of the flags might not be there, you know what I mean? You're still figuring things out. So just keep going with it. The Venus retrograde is no reason to just stop what you're doing. That could even, like, in some cases, sabotage the relationship, you know what I mean? Especially if you're dating someone who doesn't know anything about astrology. Like, that would be kind of crazy to be like, hey, Venus is retrograde, so I'm gonna take a pause. I'm gonna, you know, cancel our dates and probably just ignore you until April comes around. You know what I mean? This is not realistic. So keep going with your dating life. You can't just stop your dating life because a planet is retrograde, especially because this Venus retrograde is not going to affect everyone in the same way. Remember, Venus, it does rule over money and relationships, or I mean, it rules over romance and relationships, but I spoke too soon. It also rules over money. So for some of us, it's going to be kind of more of a financial effect than romantic. Okay, so I'm sorry, that was so wordy. I just really wanted to get it out there that you don't need to halt your dating life for a Venus retrograde. It's just not realistic, you know what I mean? And you don't want to sabotage. However, if you're in a bad relationship, yeah, this can give you the push you need to get out. If you're in a good relationship, this just allows for more reconnection, okay? Now, here's some other things that can come with this Venus retrograde. Here's a really common thing that can happen. So this could note exes and lovers coming back from the past, okay? This can note a lover coming back to try to make amends, to try to apologize, to try to get back together. And this is gonna hit Aries and Pisces influence people really hard, but it's also really gonna affect people that have an Aries or Pisces ruled 5th house, which is the house of romance, or 7th house, which is the house of relationships. So if you have Pisces, Aries energy lingering in 5th or 7th, this is gonna affect you really hard as well. So this can note people coming back from the past, okay? And this is kind of double emphasized by the fact that on March 15th, Mercury is going to retrograde in the same signs, Aries back to Pisces. So that Mercury retrograde can really enhance the social aspect of Venus retrograde because they're going to be happening at the same time. So yes, this can note people from the past coming back up. And I want to remind you, just because someone's coming back from the past, it does not mean it's meant to be. You don't necessarily have to perceive it as a sign from above. This is going to be very much dependent on what your relationship with that person was like. So if you had a great relationship, but maybe you had to go separate ways for like a logistical reason, like distance, you know what I mean? Or maybe one of you had to like go off to college, and you know, if you're like young lovers and you had to go to separate colleges and you didn't want to deprive each other of like the college experience, you know what I mean? But depending on what the circumstances of that ending was like, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, them coming back from the past, especially if they've done the work or you guys are in a better place where you can actually reconnect and recommit without like logistical issues, as I was saying. So as long as both parties have gone off and done the work or did whatever they need to do and then they get back together, yeah, this could note getting back together with your partner. Now, if it was an unhealthy relationship and this person comes back from the depths of the swamp, it might even be a sign that they really don't respect you, especially if upon breaking up you were like, leave me alone, give me my space, these are my boundaries. If they're coming back from the past to infiltrate your life, it might even, if anything, be more of a reminder that you probably did the right thing breaking up with them. And if this person is like a serial cheater, obviously you're not going to take them back, right? I hope. So yeah, it is going to depend on the type of relationship you had. Now, the fact that Venus is going to be moving back into Pisces, that kind of lets me know that a lot of the relationships, in terms of like a lot of the type of people that are probably going to be coming back to try to re-win your affections or make amends, it might have been a messy relationship. Pisces energy, it's very elusive, it's very slippery. Again, it deals in endings. So if the relationship did end, it was probably for good reason. Especially because Pisces, it also allows for a lot of addictive tendencies. So it might be someone coming back from the past that you were full on obsessed with. And I'm not saying obsession in a relationship is always a bad thing, but it can be indicative, like especially like after the honeymoon phase, it can be indicative of an unhealthy attachment. So odds are if someone is coming back from the past, they might not be the very best, just because that Pisces energy, and also that Pisces energy can allow for a lot of nostalgia. So if someone does come back from the past, please be mindful, because you might be ruminating, you know what I mean? You might be misremembering things, you might be romanticizing things. And this can happen even if someone doesn't come back. Like let's say you had a relationship that was just absolutely horrible. This Venus retrograde can kind of make you start thinking about it. And you might start thinking, oh, I kind of miss them. I kind of miss that drama. I miss that passion. No. We got to get those thoughts right out of there. Okay, so there's a temptation that can happen here. And this can know a messy affair, depending on what's going on in your chart. So you have to be really, really mindful, because the Venus retrograde can bring out, the cheaters can come out of the woodworks, okay? People who are not faithful can come out of the woodworks. So you might meet somebody and maybe they're in a relationship, but they're trying to pursue you. Run very far away, okay? You don't want to get entangled in a mess like that. Now, I will say, sometimes what can happen during the Venus retrograde, especially because it is starting in Aries, which is new beginnings, going back into Pisces, which is endings, a weird way that this can manifest is you might run into someone that you met many, many years ago, but maybe there was no romantic connection. Like you met them and it was just like a mutual someone of someone else that you knew, and they were like, oh, you know, here, this is Sam. and you're like, oh, hi, Sam, and you just don't really think anything of it. But then a few years later, aka during this Venus retrograde, you run into Sam. And maybe when you first met them, there was something about them that they didn't pique your fancy, you just weren't interested in them. Maybe they were too like fuddy-duddy or whatever. But now a few years have passed and you start seeing them in a whole new light. Like maybe they're just looking more scrumptious. You know, maybe there's just something about them that is much more appealing, like they're stable, they have a good job, they're ready to get married and settle down. And maybe when you met them years back, you were not ready for any of that, but now you are. So this can actually help reconnect you to people that you met a long time ago, but did not see in a romantic light, but now you see them in a romantic light. So it can be kind of funny in that way. And that's where like the new beginnings versus that ending comes into play. It's like, okay, the ending being someone you met a while ago and you thought you'd never see. And then of course, new beginnings, having a new fresh start with them and in a healthy way. You know what I mean? Like reconnecting with someone who you can actually go on to marry. Now, again, I want to reiterate, the people who are really going to feel this on a romantic level, especially in like a very direct, palpable way, these are going to be people with prominent Aries, Pisces placements, because Venus will be forming a conjunction. So it's going to be sitting on those placements. And it's also going to be the people that have a Pisces or Aries 5th, which is romance, or a Pisces or Aries 7th, which is relationships. Now, I will say, I want to talk about the cardinal signs and the mutable signs. So the cardinal and mutable signs are very important here because when Venus is still in Aries, the cardinal signs are going to be affected. Aries, again, for that conjunction, Libra for that opposition. Okay, so my Libra rising people, listen up, because this is going to affect you as well, because if you have a Libra first, you have an Aries 7th. So for my Libra first house rising babies, rising in Placidus. In Placidus, the rising sign is always going to be the first house cusp. So my Libra rising babies, this is really going to affect you. My Capricorn and Cancer ruled babies, this is also going to affect you because that Venus, while it's still in Aries, is going to square Capricorn and Cancer. So if you have Cap, Cancer, Sun, rising Venus, that's a big one. This is gonna influence you. So for the cardinal signs, if you're not in Aries, but out without Aries, the cardinal signs, in terms of how this can affect you, because it's not going to be conjunct like it is for Aries, but it is going to be forming an opposition for my Libras or square for my Cap and Cancer. Those are notoriously difficult aspects, okay? The opposing is a little more beneficial because this can allow for a reunion, okay? This can allow for some type of compromise. This can allow for a relationship in which both people have gone apart and in a favorable expression, they've done the work. They're ready to come back together again. They're ready to compromise where compromise needs to be made. They're ready to collaborate. So this can actually be, in some cases, favorable for the heavy Libra influenced people. Excuse me. Again, it is going to depend on what else is going on in the chart. Like, let's say you have a Libra Sun, but you have Cap Venus. That can make things a little tricky. But for the most part, this can allow for some type of reunion for the Libra energy people. Now, if you have a Cap or Cancer energy in your chart, this is going to be kind of tricky. It's not doomed. I don't want you to feel nervous or anything, but this can allow for some type of conflict in your if you're already in a pre-existing relationship. This could note some type of conflict potentially. Now, I don't want this to scare you because sometimes this conflict doesn't actually exist within your relationship, but outside of it. This could even relate to like a family member. Like maybe the person you're in a relationship with, their family member or yours is having some type of crisis that you have to tend to that inevitably impacts the dynamic of your own relationship, right? So it's not always what's going on in your relationship. Sometimes it's what's going on outside of it, especially because Capricorn energy kind of deals more in like public, external, outer. Cancer is much more personal, it's more inner, so that would be like family. But yeah, for the cardinal, for Cap and Cancer, this can note some type of relationship problem that you two have to solve. It's not necessarily indicative of a breakup. If you're in a bad relationship, yes, this can give you the push you need to get out of it. But for the most part, there can just be some type of little hiccup that you and your partner have to overcome, okay? So for Cap and Cancer, it can more so affect like a pre-existing relationship you're in. So for the cardinal signs, you are probably going to feel this Venus retrograde very intensely. Now, the cardinal signs, you are not the only ones being impacted here, okay? The mutable signs are also being impacted because Venus will eventually go back into Pisces, which is a mutable sign. So this is going to affect Pisces, as I've already talked about. It's going to affect Virgo, Sag, and Gemini. My Virgo risings. It's always funny when you are talking about a placement and then you realize you have that placement, LOL. My Virgo rising babies. You are going to feel this because if you have Virgo rising, you have a Pisces 7th house, okay? So this is where that transit is going to be taking place. So for my Virgo rising babies, yes, you're going to feel this, okay? You just are. However, I will say the mutable signs, it's not going to be as, it's not going to pack the same punch that it does for the cardinal signs. That's because a cardinal sign is a lot more aggressive. There's a lot more fire to it. There's a lot more, just like, it's like dynamite in a way, okay? For the mutable, it's a little more elusive. It's a little more slippery. Now, that doesn't mean it's not still going to have its moments, but there's a lot of opportunity here for healing and confronting emotions. So, if you have, as I've already talked about Pisces, you're going to feel this because it's going to be conjunct your whatever Pisces placement you have or Pisces 7th, 5th, transiting. Now, for the mutable signs, for Virgo, this is similar to kind of what I was saying with that Libra Aries opposition. If you have prominent Virgo placements, this Venus retrograde can actually kind of help you and your partner get closer together, allow for more compromise, allow for more collaboration and cooperation. You two can kind of put your individual skills, talents, and gifts and bring them to the table, and then you have this amazing, beautiful buffet of delicious relationship yummies, and you just get to kind of bask in those. So this can actually note a reunion. It can allow for deeper healing in your relationship. It can allow for an emotional reconnection. Now, for my Gemini and Sag babies, this is going to be a little different. I'm not saying that those benefits can't happen to you. They definitely could. But Sag and Gemini energy is a little more of an escapist kind of approach to relationships and just life in general. Virgo is more grounded, obviously, more willing to kind of deal with some things. Sag and Gemini, a little bit of an escapist. So I need you to listen very carefully. Sometimes for the Sag and Gemini babies, Sun, Moon, Rising, Venus is a big one, Mars, Mercury even, you might be in a state of denial. So when this Venus retrograde comes around, if you are in a bad relationship, it can be a little bit harder for you to come to the light. You might delay, you might deny, you might avoid. You're still kind of on that right path of being given like, hey, this relationship is, you're so close to being there, but you can still kind of delay the process, okay? Because you are a little bit avoidant. No judgment. So for Sag and Gemini, this can increase the risk of undergoing a separation. But if that does happen, it was probably meant to be. And I hate to say it, but part of that too is because a lot of people with prominent Sag Gemini placements, these are very lucky signs, they are, but they're so abundant that you can have a lot of options, and that can make it hard to choose. So you don't always choose the best option. So romantically, your love life might be a little bit more chaotic. So this retrograde can affect you in the sense that it can kind of force you to come to your senses, okay? It might not even be that you have a conflict in your relationship, although it definitely could, but it might just be a matter of finally coming to terms with the type of person you're dating. And then you decide from there if you want to get closer or break up and move apart, okay? And there might also be logistical issues that pop up in your relationship too regarding distance. So it's not always a matter of, oh, I'm gonna break up with you because you suck. Sometimes it's like, oh, your partner has to go on like a 2-week long work trip and you guys just have to take a little time apart because of that, but it doesn't mean a breakup. Now, if you are a Sag Gemini person and if you are in a healthy relationship, this can just kind of help you and your partner come to some type of like better understanding with one another, getting on the same page. This can also be like a stimulating time in your relationship. Maybe you're just a little busier, maybe you have more to do, but some of that like mutable, versatile, dynamic energy can kind of be inflamed, which isn't always a bad thing. But yeah, if you're in a healthy relationship, that's a big takeaway for everybody watching this or listening. If you are in a healthy relationship, you really don't need to worry. If your relationship is healthy, that means you have the tools and the skills and the devotedness to each other to overcome whatever comes your way. You know what I mean? As long as you guys aren't outright disrespecting each other, you're fine. So I don't want you to worry. But yes, those are the two like modalities that it's really going to affect, is the cardinal signs and the mutable signs. I want to talk about money now, because Venus rules over money and material goods. So this Venus retrograde is kind of funny because it is occurring during tax season. So it's very appropriate, I think. But the retrograde component of Venus can note some type of financial return. So for money, it's not always a bad thing. Like if people come back from the past, that's what they say, as can money and assets. So this could note like a very lucrative tax refund, okay, which would obviously come later, but still good to know. This could note being given something that you've been owed for a while. This could note being given money for a job you did a while ago, like some type of retroactive income. It could also note being maybe you lent someone something and now you're finally getting it back. There can just be some type of financial return, especially if you have a Pisces or Aries ruled second house, or a Pisces or Aries ruled eighth house. Okay, so if you have Aries second, Pisces second, Aries eighth, Pisces eighth, this is going to affect you financially. Okay, so it might still affect you romantically, but it is definitely going to affect you financially. All right, so this is what I was saying earlier when it's like it's going to affect everybody a little bit differently. So on a financial level, those placements or those like houses can be hit pretty hard. That doesn't mean it's going to be bad, okay? So what can also happen here, especially because Aries is a speedy sign and Pisces is kind of a slippery sign, okay? It's wonky, but there is movement. It's not a fixed sign, okay? If there was a fixed energy going on, like if this was a fixed Venus retrograde, I would be like, but there's mutable, there's cardinal energy, there's movement flowing. So this can note an increase in financial flow. Okay, this could note even, I know this might sound counterintuitive, but this can also be a good time to apply for a job. Hear me out. They say that you shouldn't start anything in a retrograde, even if it's like a Venus retrograde. But there's kind of an experimental energy here that if you want to just go for something, just go for it and see what happens. You never know, okay? You really don't. So this can be a good time to apply for a job, especially if you've been in like searching for one or you've been in a financial dry spell. And this can bring me, this brings me to my next thing, which is sometimes Venus retrograde can allow for an opportunity to come back from the past. Like let's say you met someone a really long time ago and there was some type of professional connection there, or maybe you two wanted to collaborate, but it didn't really work out. This can note having that person come back from the past and like hire you, offer you a job. So you can be on the receiving end of a returning opportunity based on someone you met a while ago or just someone you know. If you have been like deferred, is that the word for it? Like maybe you've been on a waiting list for something. This can be the time in which that gets like unlocked for you and you can be accepted, or you can be brought on board if you've been on like a waiting list or something. So opportunities can kind of open up in unusual and strange ways, especially opportunities from the past. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And this is really true for people that have a Pisces or Aries eighth house. Okay, so if you have an Aries midheaven, a Pisces midheaven, this could note some type of opportunity coming back from the past. This could note a change in your career, a change in your professional life. Maybe some of your work objectives are subject to change. So in some cases, this could note an increase in responsibility. Now it is going to depend on what else is going on. Like if you have Saturn in the 10th and Venus retrograde is going to cross over your Saturn, that could be kind of tricky. That could note a need to like maybe move on from a job, okay? It doesn't necessarily note like, oh, you're gonna get fired per se, but it could note that, okay, something's gonna transpire that kind of forces you to get up and go. So for my Pisces Saturn individuals or Aries Saturn individuals, depending on where your Saturn is, this could note some type of, I don't want to be negative and say, oh, it means that something bad's going to happen in your career. But it could know maybe you just kind of get fed up with something and you're on to the next thing, which is why applying for a new job might be kind of a good idea during this period for some of you. So just be mindful if you have like a Pisces or Aries Saturn. And the same could be true in some cases too if you have like a mutable Saturn, depending on where it is, okay? So depending on where it is. Now, before I get into aesthetics and appearance, which Venus does have a lot to do with, I want to address the fixed signs, or people with just a lot of fixed influence. So the reason why this Venus retrograde is kind of, it's a little like touch and go with you guys is because there's not really any unfavorable aspects being had for you here. So the reason why all the cardinal signs are going to feel it is because when Venus is in Aries, it's going to square or oppose the other cardinal signs. The reason why the mutable signs are going to feel it is because when Venus is in Pisces, it's going to square or oppose the other mutable signs, okay? So the fixed signs, there's no squares happening for you. There's no oppositions happening for you. There's positive aspects to be had, like sextiles and trines, and also in conjunctions, okay? And in conjunction is literally an aspect that notes like these things have very little to do with one another and they tend to remain separate. So for Scorpio influenced babies, when Venus is in Aries, it's going to be in conjunct your Scorpio placements wherever they are. So I'm not saying you're not going to feel it at all, but when it moves back into Pisces, then it might start to be a little activated for you, but it's going to trine for you. So if you have a Scorpio placement and Venus moves back into Pisces, it's going to trine that Scorpio placement, which a trine is a very favorable aspect. Now, I will say for the fixed signs, depending on which sign Venus is in at the time, if it does form a trine to one of your placements, like if it's in Aries, it's going to trine your Leo, this could bring in some temptation, okay? It feels good. Trines feel very good. So I will say what you can probably feel romantically is a little bit of temptation. So if someone does come back from the past, you might be all the more tempted to have a little rendezvous. So this period can actually also be kind of lucrative for your intimate life. So your intimate life might undergo an increase. So if you have prominent fixed, so Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, Taurus, your intimate life can increase. You can be having more schmellationships, basically. And there can kind of be just an indulgent nature. Like you might be feeling hungrier, you might be feeling sleepier, you might just be yearning and craving more pleasure in your life. So my fixed signs, the Venus retrograde might not be as dire for you in the way that it is for mutable and cardinal, but you're probably still gonna feel it. You might actually be feeling some of the more like beneficial energetic components of the Venus retrograde, because Venus is all about pleasure, and because it will be forming a trine or a sextile to you, depending on what sign it's in at the time, you can kind of feel very good. But that can be dangerous, because if someone comes back from the past, you might be feeling a little more compassionate. You know what I'm saying? And if you're not supposed to be with them, Now if you're already in a relationship, this can note more passion. It can note more pleasure being experienced together. So it's just not going to be as horrible for you. I don't want to say horrible. It's not going to be horrible for anybody, hopefully, but you get what I'm saying. Now, if you do have like an Aries Venus and Scorpio moon, yeah, you're going to feel it. Even though that Scorpio moon is going to form a trine eventually to that Pisces Venus, that Aries Venus is still going to feel it. Okay, so I wanted to get that out of the way for the fixed signs, because I know you're probably like, what about me? So that is kind of what you can expect. Now let's get to appearance and aesthetics, okay? So Venus has a lot to do with aesthetics and beauty and harmony, whatever. So during this time, you might be feeling experimental. You might want to undergo like a change to what you look like. And I know people say like, oh my God, don't touch anything in a Venus retrograde or Mercury retrograde, which is happening at the same time. Like don't change your wardrobe, don't do anything with your hair. That's a big one. But honestly, I have kind of a different approach. I think it's a great time to do that because it's kind of an experimental energy. And even if you don't want to do something as drastic as fully get a haircut, whatever, this could just note an increased desire to pamper yourself and take care of yourself. So especially when it comes to maybe like a neglected body part, like if your feet are in desperate need of a pedicure, this is a good time to do it. It's a good time to invest in self-care, basically. And that can kind of help mitigate some of that temptation you might be feeling if you are feeling a little lonely when this time comes around. Tending to yourself, pampering yourself, taking care of your appearance, that can really help you during this time. It can boost your confidence. It can give you that necessary oomph so that you can tell unfavorable suitors to go away. Basically, you want to make sure that people are treating you just as good as you're treating yourself. And if you're not treating yourself very good at all, it could be easy to find somebody, because if your standard for yourself and how you treat yourself is so low, then yeah, anybody would seem good enough. But if you treat yourself really well, then you kind of are, communicating to the world that it's like, this is the level of treatment I deserve and that I demand because I give this to myself. You have to be in a relationship. Your partner kind of has to be giving something to you that you maybe can't supply yourself with. And if you're able to supply yourself with tenderness, compassion, care, pleasure, joy, fun, then yeah, your partner needs to be able to bring a lot to the table. Okay. So you can feel an increased desire to tend to your appearance during this time and maximize what it is that you look like, accentuating your natural features. I do want to say, if you're thinking about getting plastic surgery, that might be a good time to maybe wait. That is a lot more permanent and extreme than a haircut. Hair grows back. If your haircut is messed up, give it a month and you can deal with it. If you go for elective surgery, if it's medical, it's medical, okay? That date is usually set in stone and you need to just listen to the medical professionals, okay? If it's elective though, especially because Venus doesn't have much to do with health the way that it does aesthetics. So if it's elective surgery, if it's already set and you can't get out of it, you're fine. But if you could help it, maybe wait, especially because we're going to be having 2 eclipses in March. And Mercury's also going to be retrograde. So if you're wanting to get your lips done or, even get something like Botox, I would try to maybe put it off until Venus retrograde is over. I very rarely have any advice. I very rarely tell anybody to don't do something during this retrograde, but I will say elective surgery during a Venus retrograde, you're cutting it close. No pun intended, okay? You're cutting it a little close. Again, if it's already scheduled, you're fine. I'm sure, if it's scheduled, it's scheduled. Don't worry about it too much. But if you can help it, maybe just wait. Okay, that's everything I can think of. I know that was a lot. I'm so sorry. That was just, woo. But yeah, the Venus retrograde is going to be intense. I hope that made sense. Let me know if you have any questions about how this could impact you, directly. I do offer readings and I offer transit readings. So if you book with me now for a transit reading, then I will be able to, in that transit reading, go over what to expect for Venus retrograde. But you have to book with me soon, because once it's approaching basically, and I need time to fulfill the order. I also have my email again in the description. If you have any questions, you can sign up for my email list if you feel so inclined. I will be, I send weekly little astrology updates. I have been sick, but I'm bouncing back, so you will be hearing more from me. Okay, yeah, and leave me a comment if you like this video, if you want to know more, if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see in the future, and of course, like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. Thank you.